Good afternoon, William.
David, how are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. How about you?
You know, for being sheltered now for 4 weeks, I'm not complaining. I actually quite enjoy it.
You look very fresh.
I get sun every day now for a good 20 minutes, so my skin has come alive. I can watch exactly what I eat, and so and I'm sleeping exactly on cue every night. So the health is just it's really helped me a lot.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. I wanted to speak to you specifically because last year you published a very prescient white paper called How to Manage an Empty Office, which was all about digital transformation and how it is transforming employment. Did you know this was going to happen this year, William? Did you have the information?
It's a great question. Was my crystal ball working? Strategic foresight specialist. If it was only by accident, because I think as you know, in the white paper, I talked about the significant shifts coming that we can see that are going to alter how companies hire, contract, and essentially access talent in the future. And part of that is the realization that your core resources may not be your employees, that some companies may in fact become totally virtual in a project-centered environment, executing their business model with resources that are just, they're on contract. They're not actually part of the employment base. So in a quirky way, the empty office was significant of yet another major disruption occurring with the workforce. And now we add the COVID situation, and it's literally this almost the same metaphor, but looked at from two different perspectives.
Yeah, I reread the white paper prior to meeting with you today. Yeah, when I read it last year, it was very abstract, futuristic thinking. But as I read it now, it's very, very, very relevant. And I'm going to link to it with this post so others can read it too. A lot of the things you spoke about were around the marketplace of employees and kind of an Airbnb, a golden model for picking up employees, as well as some of the necessities that go along with that, such as the need to develop clear process, clear structure, clear culture, so that the disruption is minimal. For us, we've taken a lot of that to heart. A lot of the things you recommended, we've started to implement. So I think for us and for any business right now, the key is to have very clear process maps, to have very clear chain of command, given the disruption that's happening now. Could you elaborate a little bit more on some of the things that you think companies should be doing right now to ensure minimal disruption?
So as I've taught for many years, that executing work in general proceeds effectively when you have clarity of goals and the clarity of the means. So the goals is the why and the what. The means is the who, how, and when. And if you think about this, converging those two perspectives is still true, whether it's virtual work or not. It becomes even more critical when it is actually virtual and your teams are scattered, potentially in time zones, potentially sitting in their offices or wherever they are in their home environments now. Now, in order to do that, the clarity of the work, the clarity of the efficiency of getting things done and knowing what people are doing is you have to have discipline. Now, the best discipline that I know is simply understanding the approach to managing and planning a project, okay? And you have to know the difference between a project and a process. A process is ongoing, repeatable kind of activities. It's actually far more easy to manage in the environments we have now because the process can be measured, you can have productivity issues on it, and remote work is pretty much geared around understanding what people are doing and the amount of time they have, et cetera. Now, what a lot of executives get concerned about now is, what are they doing at home? Are they being lazy? Are they watching too much Netflix, et cetera? You can take this to the extreme if you really wanted to, but I don't suggest it. because micromanaging virtually almost becomes a little bit of, intruding, right, upon my privacy and what I'm doing, et cetera. But I think in the work environment like now, you have to be clear about the task, be clear about the goal, and provide and instill that there's trust in the worker that in this remote environment, they're going to conduct themselves appropriately and with self-accountability to make sure that they're working. Now, the thing that really becomes transparent is what are the tasks. So in agile work environments, the way even agile teams work, a lot of times that task work is sometimes, not all the time, sometimes quantified in a project plan or a task room or an Excel spreadsheet, or you can name your flavor, whatever you want. And each individual assigned to that goes off and executes that work. The project manager says, yep, work is done, check, we're done, everybody's happy. What they were paid to do got done, okay? So in project type work, that task becomes very transparent, if you would, once it actually gets logged into some system. Mm-hmm. Now in a virtual work environment that we have now, right? I need to have that same transparency. Well, the good news is that there are virtual project platforms you can use, and I'm not even, my favorite is Basecamp, and I've used it for ever since it actually came out. But I know exactly what's on my plate for a week, for a day, in what order, because I use it then to establish my workflow. And if I can let anybody into that project room and they know exactly what I'm working on. They know exactly what, they don't have to call me up and go, well, what are you doing today? Or I don't have to have people, calling me up and having a daily check-in, right? Which a lot of agile teams do for different reasons, by the way. But I don't need to have that, because if they want to see it, they can go straight to the virtual project room and know, here's what I've got, and my time can be actually time marked. And when I'm done, I click the button, it's done. It records my time, and everything is beautiful because it's transparent. And so I think in a world where we don't see the employees anymore, we don't see the contractors, how you manage as a leader and a manager becomes extremely important. You have to have the discipline. And if you don't have this discipline, you become overbearing. Am I really getting the value out of this person? What are they doing today? And is this the most important thing? And so forth. And that all goes away when you have a discipline of planning the work, agreeing on the work, and making it transparent in terms of what we do. Now, you get into a little trouble like this with my young one in the back, you'll see that, but this is remote working.
William, I'd like to go into a little bit, I'd like to come back to this in a moment, because I think we've seen the starting pistol of a revolution in the way the way the working world operates. Again, something that you'd forecasted 6 months ago or more. Could you talk to us a little bit about so if everybody's remote, everybody's taking task-based work, ordering their days through something like Basecamp. Talk to us a little bit about what you mentioned in terms of the marketplace of employees, where it's kind of almost a race to the bottom. Are we almost there, do you think? Is there anything, what will speed up that process where we're not having offices and we're instead picking up specialists for each individual project that may not even be in the same country or the same time zone? How close are we to that model?
So I think the answer to that really depends on the kind of work, the kind of capability that is required in your business right now. So for example, in high-tech environments, let's say in a banking or the finance industry, in order for you to survive the onslaught of the innovation that's occurring in fintech, your access to cybersecurity experts, your access to people that can develop AI code and Python and all the different languages. If you don't have enough access to that capacity, your business is fundamentally at risk. You will be in trouble. So the challenge, I think, then is for companies like that right now, they already have come to the conclusion, especially in the time market, there isn't enough throughput out of the educational system for these people that are competent at the level that is required to manage their businesses in this kind of real digital, kind of techie environment. And therefore, they have no option. They have to give up the notion that I have to have somebody come work for me under a contract of employment and all the costs and time and energy that goes into that, where they might be able to pick up that resource sitting in India for the, and again, with the right interviewing and screening, you can get the asset or the knowledge you need to do the work that you need to do. So by industry, it's shifting, okay? The bigger challenge I think we have now, which is front and center, is a Bangkok Post article, 10 million Thais are going to be out of business. They're out of work. 10 million. I mean, this is huge. I mean, 20 million are unemployed right now, I think, in the US, but 10 million out of a population of 69 million. I mean, this is a lot of people that it's going to change. How do we look at the work that we're doing? I was talking with an executive recently, and they said, yeah, we ran our business with 800 people, and during this downturn, we actually figured out we could run it with 500 with no problem. What are we going to do when we have to decide to bring the 300 back off furlough, right? And they found out how much inefficiency they had in their system simply because of the constraint. So physical work isn't going to go away. When you've got to, take care of a restaurant and you've got cooks, assuming you don't have robots, you're going to need people, doing that kind of basic work to get there. But I think in the long run, the technology issue that's driving what kind of knowledge I need will create gaps where you have no option in which to hire what I call outside of the building in order for your business to run. And this is going to shift dramatically how executives and workforce planning occurs because of this notion of the invisible. You talk about the invisible office. It's the invisible employee. In fact, you may never ever meet them, except for maybe through the beauty of Zoom and so forth. But they're critical for you to execute your business. And I see we're going to see more and more of this. But it's, again, I think it's very dependent upon which industries, what business you're in, how much pressure you have, how much change you're going to be seeing, et cetera, as far as where you're going to get where this talent comes from. And by the way, if you are a data scientist and you know that, your fees just keep doubling every 6 months because there's not enough throughput out of the educational systems to produce the kind of people we need to run all these new elaborate, AI and technology inventions that are happening.
Do you see this as an extension of the freelance model, or is it more there's exclusivity in the employment, but the person is not necessarily located in the same area?
That is a great question, and I think there's an emerging model where freelancers who are really good, freelance contractors, and know that they're good, tend to be a little bit more what I call prima donnas. They're harder to manage, but you get what you get when you really have an expert that can plan and execute and save you, X amount of time to do this. But I think some freelancers, as you read in my paper, that a lot of people still want connection. They still want community. They still want something relevant to the purpose they have for the work that they're doing. And I think companies that understand that can provide new hybrid packages, as sometimes you provide, packages, if you would, to recruit people. Sometimes when you're doing headhunting and those kind of things, that you can become very creative and still allow for the freelancing mindset, if you would, and the value that it brings, but bring them into a system that makes them far more loyal to you, right? So you don't lose them to the next competitor or to the next, gig that comes up. And they want to continue working with you because you do have your systems, you do have your discipline, and the compensation is fair and reasonable. And you provide some of these other, what I call the Maslow hierarchy benefits, where I've got more sense of meaning as opposed to I'm just cranking out code for you and boom, you're done and I've got paid and I'm off to the next thing. So I think we're going to see an evolution, if not some kind of transformation in that kind of work as well. But it's got to be, in that case, it's got to be driven by the business, by the corporate entity, or by the company that's wanting to build that kind of environment to get these people to stay with them.
So in those circumstances, there would still be, you mentioned a hybrid model. Do you see, for example, agency life is a collection of individuals coming together for a shared brand objective, a shared culture, and shared outcomes with process, project management, all under one roof? Theoretically, we could all be remote. Do you imagine that there is within the next 3 years, an agency that can operate well and be completely remote?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sure, and it depends, right? It depends on all kinds of factors. With what kind of, have they become sensitized to the remote work? You know, so especially let's say creative agencies, right, that are marketing, communication, things like this. The real question becomes is how does the human creativity occur when we're together as a group discussing, bouncing idea. We can see all the nonverbal gestures. We can see that rich environment is in the physical. There's a lot of that that gets lost.
Yep.
When it just becomes a head talk, or I got to go into a whiteboard room and all I'm looking is in the whiteboard room. I'm not really looking at you because I got to concentrate on getting my pen up on the screen, etc. I think that it can be done mechanically for sure. It's happening now. The real question is can it be done at a level that creates, you know, creative problem solving, creative innovation, creative work to do the kind of work that you need, especially if you're in the creative business. I mean, this is just absolutely an important thing to figure out. I do believe that there are technologies coming that are still in R&D to a certain degree, like holographic rooms. So you literally walk in, I might be at home, but I would walk into a holographic projection of you and I standing in a room at a board as though we were literally physically standing with each other, and we have a real live time conversation. This is coming, right? Now, is that 3 years? I don't know, but there are technologies that I think are going to help us recognize that we can still do the same thing remotely. You know, and the one thing I do, so I'm on the 16th floor, and I keep looking at the blue sky. I haven't seen blue sky in Bangkok for 3 years, you know, and it's just clear. The pollution is gone. Nobody driving cars. Everybody's at home working, right? So I'm thinking, wow, well, we could imagine a world where the price for us to work remotely is the reduction of our air pollution and the number of deaths that come with respiratory problems. I'm happy to work at home for the benefit of the environment, right? So I think there's going to be other intrinsic existential shifts occur as a result of all of us recognizing that there are other benefits beyond ourselves of the world that we've created, especially with transportation and needing to go here and needing to go there and all this other stuff, right? I think in India, there were teenagers that saw the Himalayas for the first time in New Delhi because the air pollution is evaporated for the first time. And they were just like, wow, what is that, right? You know, imagine that. It's just, it's stunning, but it really forces you to think. The remote environment, what does it bring? What are the benefits, and how can we in workforce use this to our advantage? Integrating home and family, another one.
I think so. We and the whole world has immediately had to go work from home over the last few weeks. I think it's been a mixed bag in terms of the feedback I've had. Maybe because we hadn't really prepared for it. We hadn't set up home offices. We hadn't put the time into that. But I think the idea of work from home so far, it was better in theory than in practice. So for me, I know you live with your family, so you've got that nice environment at home. I live on my own. So it's kind of, I'm missing that social interaction. I'm missing the riffing on ideas. I'm missing the back and forth camaraderie of the office. And I know for many of my colleagues, they're living in small condos, or they have their adorable niece or nephew who at the weekend they love to see is a distraction when they need to edit a document, or their cat who they love to play with after work is running over their computer when they're on a Zoom meeting. So I think there's still some way to go, but definitely the seismic shift has started. There will be evolution. I see ourselves when we go back to the office, we now have the option of Zoom meetings. We now have the option of work from home. And I think the office of the short term, rather than competing with other companies, is probably going to be competing with domestic life. Like, how can you make the office more appealing than home?
Yeah.
There's not really a question there.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying, and I can certainly see that. And I do see people that are in these kind of like closet rooms going, you're working in there, you know? I mean, you can see I have an entire room dedicated for my office, and I have had for 30 plus years. No matter where I've lived, I've always bought a house or lived in an apartment where one room was my creative space. It was my man cave, if you would, right? And the reason I can really enjoy this moment is because I set it up to be the man in the man cave, if you know what I mean. But I have a little room for my daughters to come around when it's appropriate. But, you know, I totally agree. And I think that what will shift is the behaviors we have around socialization also might start to transform. So you will see condo developers develop homes and apartment floor plans that will have a dedicated space that will bring in at the right level of square footage your work from home space that you do at night or on weekend or whatever. I mean, you can imagine this, where none of the condos I see now, very few have taken in, you know, this kind of concept to actually have your working home office. And guess what? If you have a wife and a spouse that's working at the same time, and you have to be teaching your kids online in these lockdown situations, that your home environment becomes absolutely super critical. That infrastructure and how it's, you know, how you go from one room to the next, it really needs to be planned out. But I think we'll see changes. I think people will begin to understand that some remote work will be healthy and integrated into work where we do go back to the face-to-face. You know, I have clients right now that are telling me, we don't want to meet virtually, we'll wait. We'll wait to have a face-to-face engagement. And I totally get it. I mean, I'm there because I do know in some cases, you're going to get better creativity. You're going to get better generation of results when I can be there. You know, I used to work at a company called Sun Microsystems, and of all the events that they've had, and this was culturally, on Fridays, they used to have beer bust. They're like once a month, they have the beer bust in the parking lot. There were more creative ideas generated in that social environment going cheers where they couldn't get it in any other environment, including working in their offices. And it came in a social environment where kind of the tribal, you know, feelings and social elements of that are intrinsic in our being came out. You know, we're relaxed, we're not head down, stressed out, we're open, the curiosity is there, and you bubble up, you know, concepts and ideas. And more innovation occurred there in many cases at Sun, and people who work there will tell you that.
And that may be even more relevant in the Thai context, given the communal nature of Thais. For us, same kind of idea. People go for lunch together, they have coffee breaks together, they go for snacks together. A lot of the great ideas from our company come from that. So I think Thailand may even present a unique case globally, because I can imagine in the US or in the UK, the desire to be individualistic is more strong anyway. It's more natural. There seems to be here a desire to congregate, especially because of the hierarchical nature of the society, that if you're a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, 23-year-old working remotely, you're going to be a bit lost, really. You don't know, you're missing all of the social cues about what's right or what's wrong. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves all over the world. But I've been following your work for a while now, and as well as this prescience in terms of how the office looks, you've spoken a lot about agility and the importance of future leaders to remain agile in a changing world. Could you talk to me a little bit about why agility is so important, especially in times like this?
Well, I think it's obvious. You know, when you think of the word agility, you get all kinds of different words might come up for you, depending on how you look at it. You know, speed, flexibility, ability to adapt, change, right? All those words kind of surround this word that we use that holds a space for this notion of what do we do in order to deal with a shift of something that is different than we've been used to, right? And so COVID, for sure, physically imposed this shift in many ways, is we are all experiencing it. I don't want to even go through the list. The point is that agility is as much a mindset as it is anything else. And the way I'd like to share this, you know, is really to understand an agile mindset that's responding to COVID would be like this. They would see the virus issue as not something that's being done to me, but something that is being done for me. And when you think about that slight shifting of the frame, the mindset, that the virus is being done for me and not to me.
So it's an opportunity.
I'm going to be, absolutely, I'm going to be looking at it for going, what do I need to do differently in order to embrace it, right? As they come in. And there's this kind of Zen saying that I've said, many times, what's in the way is the way. This is the notion of the martial arts of Aikido, right? Which is, see how the energy's flowing at you, but embrace it and use it to your advantage, right? I mean, this is the notion of that I like to talk about agility. And so to a large degree, it really gets into your mindset, the psychology of your biases towards it. Oh, it's all happened to me. This is a bad situation. That's not agile. You're going to get crushed because you want the system to be the way it was, and it may not come back in the way we had it before. And I'm sure that's going to be the case for at least a year. I mean, I think you're going to see remnants of face mask and hand gel and, these kind of things for a long time to come at the simple level. But I think there's even a bigger shift occurring with how people might start to think about this, because remember, this is just one virus. There are epidemiologists that are talking about this. This is just a practice crisis, if you want to think about it, unless we start dealing with the source cause of this virus propagation. So if this is true, boy, we're talking about a different world, right? But our capacity to adapt, to be agile, is our survival. We no longer have options. So teaching this notion of resilience, of being, we can whine about what we have, we can get all upset about it, but we've got to embrace it, find the good in it, see the gratitude that what we do have, and start to shift. And to me, that's where the basics of agility comes in. Now, it's even more challenging when an executive team has to do that together. Because you can get one executive who's absolutely gone the opposite direction, and they can influence the entire group. This is not healthy, right? So if the group can embrace it as a strategic decision team, especially when you got to make critical decisions now, the agility mindset is foundational. It's absolutely foundational to the quality decisions you have to move forward, given the things that we're going to have to deal with.
I've read your book on strategy on that topic. It's excellent reading for anybody out there. I would highly recommend it in terms of it's digital transformation in action. It's things that were 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, and things you've helped companies to figure out so that they can stay ahead of the game. In terms of agility, I've seen you mention that not just being reactive and having a mindset that's willing to adapt to what's happening, but a degree of proactivity too. And you need to invest in R&D to try and think ahead so that when a crisis does emerge or an opportunity does emerge, you have some stuff on the shelf that you can hopefully start to implement. Could you talk about that a little bit, please? The importance of future planning.
Yeah, so this is a huge issue right now, okay? Companies that have not had a plan B figured out are struggling, okay? And in Thailand, in particular, when you talk about tourism, airlines, hotel, restaurants, all of the sub-services that go with that entire industry, it's shut down. It's literally, physically, economically shut down right now. And if you haven't thought through a worst case scenario, which is what good strategic planning does, assuming you do good strategic planning, and this is where I said in the beginning, if you don't have discipline, you are dying for discipline now in the wrong way, right? It is better to have that discipline in preparation for what events I might have to do in order to shift the strategy in order to survive. Now, there are some companies, banks in particular, who've already been through this because of the Tom Yum Goong crisis or the 2008 deal. They were forced to do it because of regulatory issues. Do you have your risk plan? Have you done business continuity planning, et cetera? What's interesting even now, is that many of those plans did not anticipate this level of event. And this kind of social, economic kind of converging that's going on. And then we add the whole oil collapse, the price collapse on top of it. Those plans aren't even effective. And they're based on very rigorous, analytical, financial, systems planning, systems failure mode, all these things you could be doing with that. It's out the door. Those plans are irrelevant now, obsolete. So from a planning perspective now becomes, I need something fast, light, practical, but I've got to make some bets. I've got to make a bet on, how fast are we going to recover? What does that look like? What's the breadth of this? How many people will get back on an airplane to come back to Thailand? The one I'm really interested in is how cruise ships, the cruise ship business has just gotten hammered. I personally don't know how I'm going to even think about putting on because of what they've done with them, right? The countries have avoided them. They've kept them out, and they're just contained and they got the virus inside. Why would you go do that? Now they're going to have to reinvent. They're going to have to start planning now how they're going to protect their core business. So they need right now, while they are not putting people on ships going out on cruises, they've got to start planning for the risk of pandemics so that they can communicate, they can build, very strong, infection control kinds of things, if you would, in order for that business model to survive, or it will go down with major investments and bankers that'll go right behind it because of the debt structure that goes. Those huge super, cruise liners weren't built for free, and they're not cheap, right? So there's some very serious opportunities now for people to get the discipline, planning through the scenarios that COVID is imposing upon us, and frame it in such a way that we can come out of it with a lot more agility, with a lot more options that we can play in order to reinvent or reimagine the things that we have to do as a business in order to grow.
I think one thing that we've learned from this as a company is really the importance of data in transformation. I know that a lot of your writings are around transformation, and it really is key to have as much information as you can about what your team is doing, how long things take, your profits, the margins on each piece of work, because that gives you that freedom to allow people to be remote if they need to be remote, or to look to engage somebody overseas. Of course, the business models themselves may change, but having that information handy allows you to make better decisions. So I think that one thing that this is going to do for many companies is speed up the digital transformation process. What would you expect some of the biggest changes to be over the next year or so? Once companies return back to the office, you've mentioned that masks may continue to be in place for longer. There'll be a shift towards work from home more. But what would you think will be the biggest changes we'll see over the rest of this year and into next year?
Well, I think it's going to be, of course, this is all about, what are the shifts in consumer behavior, right? And can you model these? So, and you can go on LinkedIn and you can get probably 20 papers a day, articles being written about this. So I don't want to exhaust that, but I do want to bring something up that you absolutely, tickled my thinking for a minute. What seriously has to change with respect to digital transformation is that it's not the technology that drives transformation. It's the information that's required that it ultimately goes through a process by which the knowledge and the things become alive so that you can go execute with more efficiency. You can provide more personalization and value and so forth that the digital world can provide. What we need in terms of data that will drive more and more changes that you're talking about is we now have to have, in my opinion, you have to have a team of people that are literally the information managers that are not, and I'm not talking about CIOs necessarily, because we tend to have looked at CIOs as the godfather or the godmother, if you would, of IT technology, the technology component. And then you see database management and so forth, and they tend to be more techies. I see that the technology shifts is that people who need to take knowledge information are going to have to start building the ability to scan the information, to make sense of it, and then inform all the systems and the innovation and the technology in terms of what are the appropriate responses we're going to need to do in order to deal with this kind of rapid level of uncertainty that we're seeing now and into the future, just given the levels of disruption. Think about the disruption that was going on before COVID came, and now we're adding this on top of it. The sense of control, the sense of uncertainty widens, but the best way to deal with that in terms of your organization, your business, is you have to have people that are fully focused on scanning the external environment and bringing that information in. These teams have dissipated over the last 10, 12 years in many cases. I think you'll see a resurrection or entirely new capabilities within organizations that are doing nothing but scanning the horizon on literally a daily basis, especially now, to begin to help the organization get the right information, make sense of it, and make their conclusions by which to drive the technology, the process, the people. We can see this now just with how data is being reported with the COVID situation. I mean, the difference, you can have literally one port say this, another one say this. They're both might be really right of how their assumptions, but there's probably something in between where you have to make sense of two seemingly disparate pieces of info to make a conclusion. What do I do? And both have very strong arguments about what what they're trying to propose. So information processing, knowledge management, I think these are going to be radical, important shifts in how we plan and execute our businesses and how we keep our people informed. And it can't be, while I say a small group to do this, I think what their job is to do is to push it to the rest of the organization. And they go, oh yeah, I've seen this, I've seen that. And then from the bottom up, you get a fully informed organization. You get a fully bright, imaginative, creative capacity to understand what my business is. How are we sustainable? Why are we going to be successful? Because they have access to the information, and the information is pulsing different decisions and possibilities. So I'm very excited about the changes that are going to occur on that basis in organizations related to digital.
And the information also, it gives a degree of freedom. Obviously, as business leaders, we need to see the data because we need to make decisions financially, who we're going to employ, what the headcount needs to be, what the profit margins are. But even for employees, one of the things I've learned from this is that the more information that we can have, the better it is for the employee. Because if we know for certain there's a 40-hour project that needs to be done, it's urgent, the employee doesn't need to be in the office to do that, as long as their time is accounted for. So there's an incentive for them to have as much transparency as possible, to be able to to estimate and take work, because then that gives them a greater freedom to work how they need to work and in the way that suits them. So this doesn't necessarily need to be, digital transformation doesn't need to be scary for employees. Of course, automation in certain industries will be, but as you mentioned, it's the people aspect that's the key.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, William, so thank you so much for your time today. Obviously, I thank you also for all of the great thought leadership work you've done, especially with the publishing of your white papers that have helped inform me, and hopefully will inform a lot more other people too. If people need to get some support, how can they reach out to you? What can you do to help other companies to navigate through this?
Look, I tend to give away more now than I have in my entire career. But first of all, just connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an invite request. I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn of articles and stuff that I'm interested in. And then I have other things that I openly share with folks as far as what I do, frameworks that I deal with, leadership, training elements, et cetera. So I'm fairly open, for sharing at this point. And this is where I'm at in my career. I don't have to worry about a lot of things, given the fact that I've had a very interesting, fulfilling, career projection, and it's been amazing.
Okay, William. Well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person when this is all over.
Okay, David, you take care, and thank you for asking me for the conversation.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.